everybody. We are here, ICF South Florida. We are so excited to have everybody here today. Today, I got to tell you, this is a topic that I didn't know existed, and so I'm really excited with what we're going to learn here about how imagery can heal us and the planet. I'm very excited with Earth Day week, and we're starting it a little bit early. Let me introduce John Rhodes is a co-founder of Imagery Coaching, an applied psychologist working with Olympic athletes, business executives, military, and in education and healthcare. John holds a PhD in psychology from the University of Plymouth and is a chartered member of the British Psychological Society. Holy cow, I'm pretty excited about all that. John, let's hear it. First of all, round of applause for John Rhodes, everybody.
It's always funny, because I read in the chat then, and I thought, actually, it's one way to make me feel nervous because, of course, I'm in Plymouth, which is 16 degrees, so by far the coldest. So,
Is that a C or an F?
Make me feel warm. C.
Okay.
What's that? 30 something, 38.
Right.
Okay. Yes. Thanks for having me. You'll notice that Joe's not here. Joe's had to nip off somewhere else to deal with something, so it'll be just me for the next hopefully around kind of 55 minutes or so. We'll have time for questions as well throughout the presentation. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat, or just unmute yourself. I'm happy for you just to semi heckle me with slight respect, of course, as well, and we'll get cracking with with the slideshow. Okay, let's have a look. Hopefully you can all see that. Okay, so just a presentation on how to save the planet. Easy, and 55 minutes, perfect. So this is really a presentation on a lot of our work and what we've been doing globally, but also locally as well, within research projects, but also with organisations, with MPs, with governments as well. So across the board, working with individuals to really help them to use imagery in a very bespoke, unique way that's specific to that individual. So I'm going to try and guide you through what it looks like, but also how to measure imagery, what your imagery ability is, and a few kind of myths around it as well. So that's the general gist, and we're going to go through a few areas of research as well. So where do we kind of fit into the ecosystem of coaching? Well, we fit by working with individuals and teams to support them to use their imagination. Why is that important? It's important because if you've ever discussed with someone a goal, they're going to use imagery. Also, if you're going to record an event, of course, yeah, you guessed it, you're going to use a form of imagery. So recall is imagery, and also fantasizing and thinking about future goals is also imagery. And what we know is, around 5% of the population cannot use visualization. If you were to say to someone, can you imagine what it would look like? They'd say, no, not really, I can't do that. And we all use imagery in a very different way. So again, what we'll try to do over the next 55 minutes or so is go through some of those areas of how to use imagery, how to train it, and also how to work with clients to really start to focus on things around climate change, sustainability, as well as your own personal goals as well. And we call it the Amplify program, which means that we are trying to amplify your level of motivation, which is what we do very well in this program. And I'll explain how that works later on as well. We'd like to start with a quote, and kind of what we do with imagery coaching is we bridge the gap between science and that applied side of how we can actually use it in a very user-friendly way. What we're trying to do also throughout is trying to connect individuals with their purpose, which is things that are beyond them, their meaning, which is things that are important to you, like why does it matter, why is it important for you to do certain tasks, and then looking at implementations. So things that you might plan, and of course actions as well. So that's the kind of route that we take. If you're interested about the theory side, we can talk about theory more, but I'm just going to go down to the more a practical side, the applied side of how to use imagery as time goes on. So how did this whole imagery approach evolve? Well, it's been going on for well over 100 years in terms of the original research, since the like 1880, where the official kind of what was called the breakfast table survey was developed, and from that point we have been looking at expanding measuring imagery and how to use it in a more official way to support people to stick to their goals and to really focus in on persevering under huge pressure, challenging times as well. So the origins really from my team based in Plymouth. We developed this approach. We've used it a great deal in cravings. We've used it in weight loss. I'm pioneering the area within the military, special forces, within climate, with working with organisations like KPMG, IBM, etc. And beyond that, we also work with Olympians and teachers and people who just want to achieve goals. So all that spectrum, because everyone's using imagery in their own very bespoke way. So we're learning from those individuals, but also we're refining it and trying to teach it through a more systematic process. We're also linked in heavily with obviously, as you can tell, with ICF and other organisations as well to offer training throughout as well. So if you do want to become an imagery coach, then we can, I'm sure we'll talk about that at the end. We have a book coming out as well next year. So that's been our core focus at the moment. And we offer a great deal of consultancy as well, more so around resilience, supporting teams to be more resilient under pressure and more conscientious as well. So again, if you're intrigued to learn a bit more about that, we can park it for the time being and we can review it again at the end. I'm happy to take questions. Okay. So let's start with this question. I'm going to pose it to you all. And it's something that we asked CEOs, we asked MPs, we asked 31 global leaders. Can you teach vision? The ability to think about or plan the future with imagination and wisdom. So I would like you to now, if possible, to use the group chat. It's a yes or no, or kind of maybe answer, but put in your answers there in the group chat. I'll take a quick drink. Oh, okay. Yes. Perfect. Cool. Okay. Maybe, kind of. Okay. So when we asked, thank you very much for coming in. Perfect. When we asked these 31 global leaders, what do you think their answer was? Not really. Okay. So these are people who are developing thought leadership programs, and we're saying, well, how do you start? We start with vision. So how do you train vision? Well, you can't really do that. Should we work on how to train vision? But that's not really a thing. So at this point, what we know is this is a mindset issue. This is a belief issue, which is from, we have the view that we can't change it and we can't train it. Therefore, there's no point in us investing time and effort into this area. So that's a real important starting question for us. And we asked that a couple of years ago to individuals. We'll park that for the time being. We're going to come back to it later on. So this is now the project. So with that in mind, let's do something about it. So there's something that we're going to do, we are currently doing, and again, we are in the middle of this big research project at the moment. We're going to share with you some of the findings to date. So we haven't published this yet, but because I've been writing a book. But what we've done so far is we've gone into schools with individuals who are 16, 17, 18, and we've said, okay, let's look at training vision. How do you think you do it? And we've worked with youngsters primarily because they are the leaders of tomorrow. They are the ones that will inherit, what we leave. And so we're working with youngsters to look at what we would say is more focused around behavioural intentions. Of course, we can measure behavioural intentions as well. We can measure mindset. So we'll look at what we do as well to measure those individuals on those areas. But what we generally do, we go to schools. Schools have, quite often in the UK, they'll have like sustainability councils where a select group of individuals will go onto a council and then they will discuss ideas, things that they can change potentially with their student population. So we have recruited 29 pupils out of a bigger sample pool of 294, so a big old sample, so in 3 different schools, and we're working with those 29 in a great deal of depth and detail. Okay, so what are we doing? First off, we need to measure mindset. Okay, we need to look at how they're using imagery, and then we're going to look at how they come up with some behavioural intentions as well. Okay, so what we hear usually when we start with individuals, and again this is across age ranges, it's from university students as well, is we say, right, climate change, talk to me about climate, talk to me about, just general change. And I'll say, well, there's no point, we're far too late. Of course, I'm not going to disagree with them, or agree, in fact. And if you're au fait with the latest research, it kind of is. Our 1.5 degrees C is pretty much too late. But we need to think. This is why imagery is very important, in a creative way. Our imagination will get us out of where we are. So we start off by hearing these certain things. I'm not ready to start. Not really priority. Climate is not really priority. That's fine. Okay. Understand your views. And what we do next is we then look at measuring every individual. So of the 294 individuals, we measure them all. We say, right, okay, let's look at measuring your mindset. On the left-hand side of the scale, it is no matter how hard you try, you can't change. So you think this might be innate, something that you're born with, you've inherited. On the other side of the scale, of course, it's more environmental. So you could have a mixture of the two. You might be 50 or whatever. So we start off with simple questions and we say, right, height. Can you change your height? If you try to grow really want to be taller, how do you think you're going to? Will you change in your height? No. Okay, fine. Where would you rate it? A 0. Like, it is what it is. Oh, okay. Okay, fine. Okay, we understand that. That's your belief. And of course, we move on to other things as well. So we'll say, right, well, how about your lung capacity? And I'll say, well, I don't know. Maybe I can become fitter if I exercise. And they'll discuss these beliefs. These are just beliefs that people, students are measuring first, and then they're going to discuss later. And of course, we get on to the more interesting, dare I say it, more attractive questions. And we'll say, right, how about mental toughness? Do you think that you can change it? Or do you think you're pretty fixed at it? So if you've read any of the original Carol Dweck work on mindset, you'll kind of start to understand that this is a similar continuum. What we're doing here is we're using these very small, what we would call sub-factors, to really pick apart these specific areas. So we say mental toughness, and they generally say, well, you're kind of born with it, but you can develop it. Okay, that's your view, fine. And we go on to creativity. Just out of interest in the group, just where do you think youngsters would rate creativity on their mindset? Do you think it's something which they perceive as fairly fixed or growth?
I would think growth.
Yeah. Everyone else semi-agreeing? Anyone disagree? Only me. They rate it as 25.
Really?
Okay. Oh, you've 25. Yeah. And it's interesting because we do this. I do this also with the military. I do this with leadership, for example. It's a good one. Leadership. Do you think you're a born leader on the left-hand side? And we get them to stand up, and they all line up along this big continuum, and you can see a real divide. Okay. Creativity is important because creativity is problem solving, and people generally see creativity as being able to play the guitar, being able to paint, or certain other things that are associated with the arts, rather than I need to try and press on this target. I need to, problem solve where the enemy's coming or whatever it could be. And we do this also with students. We'll say to my psychology students, I'll say, where do you think creativity sits? And they'll say, it's something that I'm not naturally very good at. Like, I can't change it. But you're always writing essays. Yeah? Like, are you writing the same essay all the time? Are you developing your style? Are you refining what your practice? Well, I suppose I kind of am. So how are you getting better? How are you improving? Through creativity? Oh yeah, I suppose I am. Okay. So then you have that penny drop moment with those individuals. So we talk about this as well with all of our groups. And of course, we care about, at this point, climate change. And we'll say, although the question at the bottom isn't very isn't overly useful. We just say generally, do you think that you as an individual can have an impact? On one side, no, I can't. Doesn't matter what I do. I believe that whatever I do is not going to matter. On the right hand side, yes, what I do adds. It all adds up, and we can absolutely change. So when we measure our sample of 294 people, we get a score of about around 23. Okay. Now that's our baseline. This is good. Psychology, we love stats, right? Because all we care about is the intervention, and hopefully that number changes at the end, right? And then we can write it up as a very attractive paper at some point. So this is our starting point. It's our baseline. So we talk about mindset in great depth, and this is how Joe and my brain work in terms of how we visualize things to youngsters, and we'll say, this is your environmental mindset of Jenga. Okay, so there are certain things that you perceive that you may not be able to control. So if you take away the blocks of certain things, the tower does wobble, as you can see, but it doesn't impact your goal. The only one thing that's really important for you to not remove is what? Of course, you've guessed it, is mindset. If you remove your belief that you have no power and no control, our tower falls over. So that's where we start with these groups, is we start talking about mindset, because we know that values, we can talk about values again another time, but values is our level one, which we talk about, sustainability, is it a real core value? Then we go on to beliefs, and we talk about beliefs around mindset. And then we look at attitudes as well, as we kind of progress through this model that we use. So let me now give you an example of what we're talking about when we talk about imagery. So when we talk to coaches, but also when we talk to psychologists as well, and we'll say, what do you think we mean by imagery? Quite often they'll say, well, it's how you visualize the future. Yeah, cool. That's one part of it. That's a small part of imagery. So you probably do it all the time anyway. But what we do is we make it very deliberate and very official when we use imagery. So what happens when you use imagery quite often is you will think of something, and we'll do a task in a moment. And as you're doing right now, of course, yeah, talking to yourself, yeah, the chatter starts. And we use this model, which is quite old school. If you've ever done Psychology 101, you've got this working memory model, where you have this visual spatial sketchpad, it's called. Something comes into your head, you think of it. Then you have this phonological loop, goes around in circles, and you talk to yourself, and you justify things, and perhaps this is where that chatter starts. And then the third area is called the episodic buffer, but we look at it based on meaning and emotion. So you timestamp a point. So quite often we'll say to people, can you imagine what Christmas was like? And I'll say, yeah. What was the season like? They can timestamp it. It was like this. For me anyway, it was cold. I was sat around with parents, and I can hear, the noises. I can hear perhaps the Christmas, the very not annoying at all Christmas songs going on in the background. And you start to then sketch out this image, and you start to talk to yourself. And these three areas are hugely important. So imagery really involves these three processes. Process one is you see something, or maybe you hear something. So maybe, as I said, Christmas, you might have thought of, a ringing bell, still imagery, auditory imagery. You may have, there may be a taste involved, there might be a smell involved. For me, it would be perhaps mince pies. Okay, it could be some kind of Yule log. That's quite a nice smell. Or pine trees, that piney smell. So again, this is all imagery. And what we know is that 3, a bit like the song, is the magic number. What does that mean? It means that to get the most out of using imagery, it needs to be ideally visual, kinesthetic. Okay, so kinesthetic meaning movement, how do you feel? And then emotional. Of course, it can be auditory, gustatory. It can be other forms as well of imagery. But they're the 3 prime ones that we look at using. If you're up to speed with imagery research, you might say some people just cannot image, of course. That's called aphantasia. And we know that some individuals cannot do that. But similar to superpowers, as one domain switches off, if you like, one sense switches off, other areas do become a lot more hypersensitive as well. So can I give you an example of that? Yes, of course I can. We can look at, can I give you an example on the fly? Pharrell Williams is a good one. Musician. He hears music in colours and tastes. Can taste mustard and other things that you can. So very strange. Lady Gaga, there you go. Another one as well. Who uses a lot more of that more visual based popping colours rather than auditory, which you think is kind of strange for a musician. Famously, I'm not sure whether you know this. Maybe it's one of my pub quizzes things that I know, which is Oliver Sacks, the very famous psychologist, of course. Again, he suffered from aphantasia. So again, he was a non-visual imager, but again, other senses were heightened as well. Okay. Exactly, synesthesia is the word. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so that's it. When you have an overlapping in senses, that's synesthesia. Perfect. Someone's been doing the reading. Perfect. Okay, so these are the three areas that we work with when we talk to individuals, and what we know is that when we work with teams, we'll know that people, of course, overthink. I can hear my thoughts a lot. Okay, when you hear your thoughts, what are you saying? Where are you? Well, and they start sketching out things, and strangely, this happens quite often at the end of the day. So if you have a big meeting tomorrow, or if you have an interview tomorrow, this will generate a lot more images, but also a lot more chatter, because it means something to you and you're trying to place yourself in an environment. So again, what we do is we try to support you to manage your thinking. Of course, as thoughts come in, it's about the attention we give them. So we're working with individuals to give certain thoughts more attention than other thoughts as well. Okay, so let's try this out. Okay, so let's put the model into practice. Oh gosh, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to give you a word, and as the word comes on the screen, it's going to be a word in white. I would like you to give the word attention. And what I would like you to try and do is use multi-sensory imagery to experience the word. So when you see the word, maybe you can think of where you are. Maybe you can add some sound to it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you roughly 15 seconds to use multi-sensory imagery for this word. It may make you feel a certain way. Here is the word. Okay. Me too. Yeah, and the weird thing, I'm not sure whether it's the same for everyone, but I've got 38 unread emails. I've had to focus on a task today. So I've got anxiety slightly around these 38 emails in my email chain. Okay, fast, exactly, yeah. Stress, yeah, exactly. You're with me, all anxious. Perfect. So what you may be able to do is you may have placed yourself, maybe you're sat at your desk and you can think of yourself typing away. Maybe you heard your fingers tapping. Maybe you felt the movement. Maybe you felt like I did, maybe stress, anxiety, whatever it could be. Now this is important because the attention on that word, it makes you feel a certain thing, okay? And this is what we call elaboration. The more detail you elaborate on certain things, the more important it is. Okay, pizza's coming in. Eric's hungry. Okay, let's park pizza for the time being, but we'll come back to pizza. It's fine. Don't worry, Eric. I'm not going to leave you out. What happens when you hear the word emails? In fact, let's use the word pizza for the argument of Eric. So let's go for pizza. When you hear the word pizza, what do you think of? You think, right, I'm not sure whether it's you. I see the cheese, you pull it out and it kind of goes elongated. I can see the heat rising off the pizza as I open the box. The group chat's gone. Beer, oh yeah, here we go. Italy, fantastic. Question to you right now, very quickly. What's happened to the thought about emails? It's gone, right? Gone. That's because this is, if you take one thing away from today, this is it. Your executive processing, your executive system of how you think of one bit of information, you can only do one thing at a time. Okay? What will happen is you can give attention to one stimulus. If you elaborate on that stimulus, you create rehearsal. If you create rehearsal, that would then create this loop of imagery. If you add meaning to it, then it can also exacerbate as well. Okay, and then it usually drives apologies if you put overweight in that in the chat, but it could also lead to you going and buying a pizza. Okay, if you have that emotional connection and satisfaction, you can then go and buy it. Which is why a lot of our research, it's evolved over time, but it started off in cravings, because we know that the chocolate bar is very emotionally connected to cravings with regarding to immediate satisfaction. I can go downstairs and get this chocolate bar and it gives me this feeling, this hit. But what I don't think of immediately is my value of health. That takes a while to come up, to kind of go through the maze, while the chocolate bar thought is pretty quick. That thought is taking the freeway, whereas my other thought regarding eating a salad, that's stuck in traffic. That's walking, in fact. So again, the attention is really important. And what happens quite often, again, going back to the slide here, is we talk to ourselves. What does it mean to me? How do I how do I play it out? What's connected? So you add this auditory focus. You may see it. That's where we come in, using imagery. And then, of course, we then often timestamp it. So a birthday, it could be some kind of meaningful experience. But what we try to do at all these points is we think about the emotional connection. We think about the kinesthetic awareness. We think about, again, how you may, the sensitivity to certain things, the touch, all these things, the proprioception, all these things add to the elaborated picture on how you focus on a target stimulus. Okay, so that is, in a nutshell, what we do. We work with individuals to focus on a target bit of information. With our young group, with our youngsters, we're doing the same thing. We're saying, right, what's important to you to try and work on, to try and change? And they'll say things like, maybe recycling. Okay. And we call it a choice point. We'll say, right, at the choice point where you've done a wrapper and you're about to throw it in the general waste area, like what's going through your head there? What's the choice point? Well, my choice point is like, I should probably recycle this. Okay. Why? Because of the meaning. Okay, what's the meaning? What's important to me? Why? Because of the purpose, the impact on the planet, the beyond me piece. It's easier to do this with non-students, ideally, because often when we start off with youngsters, they'll say, "Well, climate change, that's in years' time," whereas for us now, that is quite often a contemporary topic. We've looked at frequency of how often people talk about climate, and we know that 16-year-olds are talking about climate a lot more than us as adults. So they do care, but again, goals and priorities are slightly are adapting and refining over time. Whereas for us, perhaps we're a lot more headstrong. So I've clicked on one cloud. Doesn't matter. Okay. So what we're going to do now is this, although I've given away the slight spoiler, but I would like you to think of, and you can use multisensory imagery if you want, an apple. I'll give you 5 seconds. Okay, 5. Usually when I do this, I have all the screens all on. I can see everyone imagining, which is kind of strange. You haven't got to close your eyes to use imagery. You do it all the time. If you have a drink on your desk, like I've got my cup of coffee, I can look at it and I can imagine drinking it. This is called observational imagery. So you haven't got to do it all the time. And when we teach it to athletes and to military and to school kids as well, we get them to do it with their eyes open, so they can do it in the moment. Okay, so as you go forward, thinking more about imagery, perhaps think about eyes open imagery. Okay, there's no real difference when we measure it eyes closed and eyes open. There's no real difference between groups. Okay, so back to apple. How many of you saw a red apple? Just a mini hand maybe, or red, green, orange apple. Anyone? No, luminous pink. No, no abstract apples. Okay, fine. Anyone had a leaf on theirs? Oh, refreshing. Christmas would be perfect. Okay. The logo, I like it. Very good, very good. That's an abstract thinker right there. Okay, so we can measure it, and let's quickly do it now. I know I clicked on the slide by mistake, but there you go. So what we know is people will see that apple at a different level. So again, can you in the group chat just put in the number that corresponds to what you saw? Was it a 1? Didn't really see anything, but I knew there was kind of an apple there. I kind of got an apple, but it's still quite black and maybe pixelated. Or 6 out of 6. Like, I was eating that thing. It was great. So again, perfect. Okay. So if you scored a 6 out of 6, what we usually say is you are a hyperimager or hyperphagia. If you scored, usually for this, people are around 4 or 5. So again, that's what we see as a norm. But as you can see, people are scoring it. Eric scored it as a 4. With it, and Lisa also as a 5. With a bigger sample, what we usually find is we'll have individuals who are 1 and 2. And those individuals, we would then need to focus in on a lot more so than those who are scoring 4 and 5. Okay, so this is
Curious, John, I had a question. So I picture, and I saw somebody else had done this too. So I initially saw it as a whole apple, and then I saw it cut, and then I saw it with peanut butter, and like I imagined it all the different ways. I didn't go as far as applesauce or apple pie, but I like literally was going through all the different ways it might look and taste and crunch and all that sort of stuff.
Jimmy's hungry too.
I am.
That's what you want to do. I mean, at the minute we're just looking at the visual side. If you're able to actually do that and go through, so let's refine Jimmy's imagery then. So for you, Jimmy, we kind of take that to the next level. Can you imagine eating it?
Oh, totally. I
And
can
the noise
feel
it
it.
makes?
Oh, the
Okay.
noise, yeah, the crunch, the feel of the skin, the tension, sure.
Can you imagine, and just bear with me here on this one, can you imagine eating it? And as you eat it, you look inside the apple and you realize there's half a worm in there.
It's a little disgusting.
Can you imagine it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah,
So,
I can feel my stomach kind of going, oh, that's not good.
so this is where it sounds strange, but we want people to experience this feeling of this emotional feeling of not disgust by any means, but this is where we want people to go to be able to expand imagery, because we want people to start thinking in this very abstract way. Because what we're talking about here is we're talking about memories versus present day. I've kind of done it recently and I can recall it very quickly. Versus this is fantasy. Like, this is where we want to get people to, because when we start thinking about saving the world, you'll need that fantasy and abstract thinker. So these tasks like that, the Apple task, and again, perfect example, because sometimes and I sort of say to people, what do you do next? You've just eaten a bit of apple. What do you do next? And often people say, well, pull the worm out, finish the apple. So again, that could be the connection and response, which is then predicting what you would do based on. Anyway, so that's the whole cycle of where you want people to go. So
And
if
can
you
I
can
ask, and maybe you're going there, but is the reason why it's important to be able to get into fantasy land is because the brain cannot deliberate between fact and fiction? Like, if that image is there to the brain, it's as good as real. Is that somewhere? Am I close on that?
you're spot on. So
Okay,
we know that when we look at fMRI scans, we know that obviously biting an apple is going to have more neural
great.
activity, but we know that it's pretty similar, and
Okay.
that's why we're getting people to do that, to experience that feeling of whatever goal it is eventually.
Right.
So, and why is that important? It's important because some goals feel like they're miles off. Like if you booked a holiday and it's in, next year, oh God, I've got to wait all that time, and it feels like it's a big, it's a big long wait. But if you imagine it, it brings that urgency closer, like you've almost touched it. So that's what we try and do with a lot of our, with all of our individuals, is we would go through, especially for our weight loss samples, and we'll say, what would it be like at that point? And we get you to experience it as if you're pretty much there. So yeah, and that's what we're trying to do. Yeah, that neural connectivity. Eric, you've got a question. Do you want to? I'm not sure that Eric wants to unmute himself and ask the question.
I do. I'd love to. John, this is awesome. Thank you for taking us through this. Hey, this will be, I don't know if anyone knows this about me, but for years I worked at Men's Health magazine. And I can remember, John, there was a time that we published these findings based on, I don't know, some academic findings, where if people visualize doing their exercises, went through that process, that would actually lead to muscle mass gain and sort of the same benefit as if they actually did the exercises. Have you ever run across that, or is that back up what you're sort of saying?
Yeah, we haven't replicated that same study around muscle mass. So we are still really proactive in our team, doing a lot of things around physical activity, but similar areas of, like, we work more so on like resilience and grit, and like challenging goals, adversity. So we had an article in Men's Health not too long ago with ultra runners. So again, just as a very quick aside, where we would use imagery to get non-runners, so people who were like intrigued to get healthy. That was their core value, health. We recruited them, and we said, we gave them a motivational interview at the baseline to all these participants, and then after 8 months, we said, "Do you fancy running an ultra marathon?" And of course, the majority of our sample said, "Absolutely no, like you're crazy. Why would we want to ever do that?" We said, an ultra marathon is 50 kilometers as a minimum. Who wants to do it? And so we had 15 of our sample who wanted to partake. So we split them into a control group and an experimental group. And one group got the imagery training. And what they did ultimately was they were able to visualize the critical point of dropout. What would happen? What would create the excuse? And so what we did with those guys in particular, and girls in particular, is we focused on the excuses that come up tomorrow, today. So for example, we know that within our samples, people generated their excuses the night before they were going to go out for a run. So if you've got a meeting or some kind of social event, and if you don't really want to go to it, the excuse will start earlier than you actually deliver the excuse. Okay, so we found that with our samples or our runners, we said, right, what can you do tonight to ensure that you go running tomorrow? And they're like, I can leave my shoes by the door. And of course, shoes by the door evoked imagery, right? Because they saw the shoes and it was a cue. I go running in the morning. What should I think about? So we went through this whole systematic approach to using imagery to support runners doing an ultra marathon. And within our research, the imagery group, we had something like 5 times more likely to finish the an ultra marathon. So we use it a great deal. Again, more so for performance side, and we can talk about, again, goals is another area we can talk about in another point. We haven't used it in a great deal of, I'm just looking at the chat, in grief. We have no research on that at the moment, and we're still collecting data also on stress and anxiety, as well as PTSD. So we are doing the research, but I just can't give you a definitive answer whether it works or not for our approach. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question, Eric. I'll carry on and you come to me at the end. Okay, so that's how we measure it primarily. This is only visualization. Imagery is multi-sensory, so we need to use the other senses as well. And what we do is we've written a few papers looking at how to use it in different areas. So we use it in healthcare. We use it within elite sport. The bottom paper there, paper 6, is the Couch to Ultra Marathon paper as well, which I'm happy to share to people if they want to learn more so about about what we do with that sample. Okay, so we teach individuals to do a couple of things. We know that imagery is based on primarily it's based on vividness and controllability. What does that mean? Vividness is how clear is the picture, and controllability, as I see it. So the minute we're talking about vividness, I can see the polar bear there. But hold on, let's just controllability, the other factor. Let's change the image a second. Oh, different thought, different stimulus, different part of attention. And again, it's still pixelated, but we can try and make it from this old analog TV set. I'm not sure what you've got, Jimmy, but 4K TV, Ultra HD ready, whatever it could be. And that is where you want to go, to that clarity in vividness. And that's what we try and work with individuals to develop that clarity through using multisensory imagery as well. So I'm going to try and wrap up quickly. I'm mindful of time, and I always overrun. But what happened with our young sample of Sustainability Council leaders is we said to them, let's teach vision, and we asked them a few questions. We said, justify your purpose. Like, why is this important beyond you? Why is it important to the bigger group? Why is it important not just for you 29, but for the other 200 and whatever 80 students? So they justified it, why it was important. They all had a shared goal. They all came up with goals themselves. The research team, we did not give them any ideas. They had to come up with their own creative ideas. Okay, so all we do is we teach them imagery. All we do is we support them to come up with areas around purpose, meaning, and then we support them as much as possible to really focus on how that would look. So what do? So first off, they came up with, in fact, the first idea was actually the second one down, was a guy who said, I've got it. We need to save water. What do you mean save water? We need to make the school showers cold. So well, I don't think you can do that. It's a great idea, because if they're cold showers, people either will not shower or they will shower very quickly, and we can save water. Okay, how will that look? Well, I could go and ask the school janitor to turn the temperature down, even if we turn it down by 3 degrees. Like, they're scorching anyway, we need to turn them down. Okay, who's in charge of that? I'll be. And he allocated himself as the lead. And that was quite a mean one, because he turned it down quite a lot, and yeah, it did become quite a smelly school. But it's all about climate for those guys. Easy wins. Again, the allocated areas around plastic cups, like meat-free Mondays, sustainable fish Fridays. So these were all the intentions they all carried out. What we were really interested in also was what happens beyond the first few weeks of us working with this group. And what happens beyond was interesting for us, because this is where intentions became implementations. And what that means is this. We asked them all, social media wise, what are you guys following? And they said, we're all now following a lot more social media posts and companies and organizations that are focused on climate change, for example, Greenpeace. They were buying, and this isn't just the 29, this is the 294 individuals, students, they were buying a lot more sustainability brands. They were not buying brands, the mainstream brands, they were buying things like Patagonia, right? Which I know it's cool at the minute, but they were focused on sustainability brands. And also the other weird thing that they started to do was they started to upcycle. Whether it's fashionable, I'm not sure, but they started to upcycle in great detail by finding old bits of wardrobes and things and painting on, and and doing that in their families as well. Okay, so we were seeing these things that were happening as a consequence. And of course, what we look at is we look at these areas of we start with our local schools, and we look at really focusing on training vision and imagery, and then we look at how that moves to intention and then action. Okay, of course, I would not be a psychologist and get away with it without measuring again. And of course, we do the retest on the 294 students, and we've still got more to test. We've still got another year to run this project. And of course, I've got to read my cursor out of the way. They have all hugely improved on their score. Great for us. And these statisticians here, you can see straight away that there's a big change in that mean score. So it's exciting times, but also we're looking at, does that change again and that longevity of the project. And this is I think it's our third year of running the project at the moment. And we're really lucky to have partners that work with us within this area. Okay. So that's my kind of takeaway, and I'm sure you've got questions. We do offer training as well. I'm sure you're aware of it anyway. But yeah, and you can find Jo. Probably she's not here, but she's again available on LinkedIn, etc. And we offer courses that we can train people to become imagery coaches as well as learn all the ways to measure imagery, mindset, and similar things as well. Cool.
Fantastic. Wow, John, thank you so much. That was fascinating and so informative. I now understand what you're doing over there. So it's
busy.
Yeah, definitely keeping busy. So thank you so much, and thank you for everybody. Go out there and connect on LinkedIn and go to the website and check it out. I did, and so I kind of sort of understood, but now I really understand a lot better about what this is. Does anybody have any questions? I probably have a couple, but I want to hear from my audience first. Go ahead and come off mute if you want to, and if you all shout at once, then we'll just pick somebody.
I'd actually like to learn hear a little bit more about the training, John, if you want to talk about that for a second.
Yeah, sure. So we generally only teach people who've got motivational interviewing skills as a background, purely because that's our kind of that's the fundamentals. So what the approach focuses in on is we use motivational interviewing primarily, and then what we do is we at critical points we look at training imagery. So we'll say, for example, we can explore values, we can explore various things, but when it comes to goals, we'll then say, what does your goal look like? Can we explore that in more depth? Can we measure your imagery ability? And so the training is really focused in on, it's 5 days, and it's 9 till 12 in Eastern time. And it's 3 hours worth of sessions which are planned for you to get the most out of those 3 hours based on feedback. We deliver about 30 minutes worth of content. We give you something to go and try out. It's all on Zoom, and then you bring it back to the main room. We share ideas of how people may have struggled with imagery, or there is a systematic process of how we use it, which clearly is our kind of our rigorous method, and also to ensure there's high fidelity as well in our methods and what we do. So it's 5 days. We start off with more individual imagery for the first 3 days. And then day 4 is focusing on teams. So how do you train imagery to a group of 100 people? So again, that's kind of my forte, and where my background is, you've got 100 people now and you've got 2 hours and you're working with, in my case, it could be a Formula 1 team, and you've got to go and do your session quickly. And I've only got 2 hours, that's it. So then measuring imagery, delivering intervention, and ensuring you're doing it in a quality format. And usually I do 2 sessions with everyone anyway, test, retest. And the last day is more about climate and how to use it within big organisations, like I work with KPMG and IBM, etc. So we focus more so on that on the final day.
Very cool. What other questions do we have out there?
I have a question. This is Alex here.
Yes.
So, do the images need to be always objective, or can they be metaphorical?
Ideally they should be more factual than metaphorical. We try to make things as realistic as possible when we use imagery. So, and again, we try to use first person imagery, so from your own perspective, and that's purely because it gives you more emotional connection as well. So we know that from third person, or if it's really abstract, the goal is something which is somewhat really out of reach. It's really difficult to then connect on that emotional level. So we try to, where possible. Of course, we work with clients who, I'm just thinking, like, we work in the area of weight loss. So some clients might say to us, my goal is to lose weight, but there's no way I can imagine that. There's no way I can imagine myself in 1 year, 2 years. I just can't see it. I can't see myself losing weight. So we'll have to work on more of a mesocycle and more of a medium-term goal. So we'll say, right, well, what does it look like over 6 weeks? What does that look like? what's your key point of, what's your main point of an obstacle or struggle? So we really work on that tangible goal. And for a lot of people, to be honest, with the weight loss sample, things like, I can imagine Friday night, and I get a takeaway. It's been a really busy week, and that's where I struggle. That's where I go back into my old habits. So again, we try to work in more so on factual points where we can then look at refining imagery and what that looks like.
And are you in this imagery, as a follow-up to that, the goal is to image the actual result, not the process leading to the result, right? So in the weight loss example, are you imagining yourself 6 weeks from now having lost a certain amount of weight, or are you imagining the process? Yeah,
so I've just given you today the tip of the iceberg. So the rest of the iceberg looks like this. So if we have a larger, what we would call a macro goal, so to lose weight in in a year's time because of purpose, because of my family, because of playing with my kids, because of other things that are beyond you. So we focus on that as the starting point, and we work backwards. So what we would call these meso goals or medium-term goals. So what does milestone 1 look like? What does milestone 2 look like, etc., etc. So we look at milestones as well, but what we can really focus in on is that micro level. So we get people to imagine all those phases. The key thing for us is we also get people to imagine failing. So we'll say, what does it feel like in a year's time when you have not kept to your routine? If and the people usually say it feels normal, like that feels really, like me to not stick to goals, and it feels depressing, it feels upsetting. Where will you be in a year's time when you've made no changes? And then we'll get them to experience it, and then we work the other way as well and say, okay, let's now imagine you have made changes, you have hit these milestones. How does it feel now? And they'll say, uplifting, I got my density back, I feel empowered. And that point of mental contrasting, a lot more research than I've done in mental contrasting, that is the amplifying state where we know that people then go, I need to stick to this goal. And it really amplifies motivation. And that is the game changer for us, is doing that factor of imagery.
Really, really cool. I was wondering, John, if we're looking at weight loss, or if we're looking at, the ultra marathoning, how much of that like tipping point is a part of someone? I mean, someone has to believe, I am a marathoner. I am a person who cares about his weight. I am a person who, whatever, works out every day, exercises every day. And so sort of, and I know we're not supposed to label ourselves or label other people, but when you assign yourself that characteristic, that quality, and it's not, and I totally agree with the whole, what's it going to feel like when, because that's incredibly powerful. I wonder how much does that quote labeling or characterizing myself, I am this type of person, how much does that play into it, if at all?
It's huge. Yeah, it's huge. We don't label people in terms of, we don't say to people, label that emotion. We connect them with their values primarily. So my value is health. Usually it's health with individuals, and they'll say, and we'll say to them, well, when's the biggest conflict with your value? Friday night when I'm not healthy. Okay, what happens? I feel guilty. And I know better. Okay, so we work with them on their values, because if you can, at that critical point where you go, I'm going to order a takeaway or whatever it could be, have your value at hand, and your values are really primarily something that we've been focusing on for a while, then that is the image you want connected to your value, and that has the ability to change beliefs, and that's the ability to then change your attitude towards who you are. So identity is really quite important. Again, we could talk about narratives, which people generally do. They'll say, we say to people, how do you introduce yourself at a party? And they'll say, I'm a psychologist, or what's your headline? I'm a coach. Cool. What does that mean? So again, we can use that as well, that narrative aspect, which is what we generally do, to then say, well, when do you become a runner? And people generally, they sacrifice a lot more. They'll go out running in the early hours of the morning. They'll have this real critical choice point. They'll be totally committed to their goal. And also, they would generally buy running stuff. That's when they know. So we see it a lot, and we can see those behaviors.
That's awesome. Yeah, Shakti in the thing says embodiment, found very impactful. Yeah, embodiment. That's the more technical term that I was looking for. Thank you, Shakti, for that. Eric, I see you got to go. In fact, we are at the bottom of the hour. So do we have any last questions, or are we good to go? What do you say, folks?
I'm good. Thanks, John. This was awesome.
Pleasure. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate everybody coming out today and spending an hour with us. Also, be on the lookout. We do have International Coaching Week coming up in a few weeks, so look out for a lot of neat programming and some opportunities there for all of our coaches. What else do we have? We have Masterclass coming up in a couple of weeks, so check the website, check your emails, and I know you're getting a lot of emails. I'm going to try and ease back on those. I don't know what's going on, but I'll ease up on the emails if you guys are feeling the crush, the pain of the emails that John made us feel today. I might be a part of that problem, so I'll ease up on those. So I appreciate your patience and everything. And John, thank you so much. This was really, really enlightening. I really appreciate your time, and go spend some time with your kids. And I hope to see you again real soon. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Take care.